much. So you'll notice straight away from the heading here that I'm going to be focusing on education. And from meeting you, I mean, a big part of this is collaboration and connectivity. And I've connected with many of you. And you're not always in education. We're all focused on technology, but we're not always in education. So what I'd like to do as well, you've been sitting here for a full hour so far. You've heard 2 presenters. I'd like you to, first of all, can you all stand up? And while you stood up, perhaps give yourself a shake because you've been sat down for a long time. Okay, I want you to be invested in what I'm saying. So, can you sit down if you're to do with education? Okay, oh, more than I thought. Interesting. Okay, can you sit down? So these are the people I still need to hit. Not exactly hit, but you know what I mean. Can you sit down if you have children? Can you sit down if you have nieces, nephews? And can you sit down if you have friends with children? Great! So I have got you all invested. Now, whoever came to your mind as you sat down, please think about them as I'm describing some of these things. So you are all highly connected with education. You're all connected in some way. And in fact, those that sat down, first of all, connected to education, you've probably got a personal tie there as well. So this is very important because we need to build a future that's successful and focused on what we can do with technologies. So, I focus a lot of my research on mobile technologies. I like the fact that we have devices, we have handheld devices here, we have tablets and things that can do things that we could never do before with other tethered technologies. And they can really transform learning. However, research findings show that educators are not integrating mobile technologies effectively in education. Now, I have to stop and say, I've been an educator as well. I've been a classroom teacher for 16 years before I moved into higher education. This is not a blame on teachers in the slightest. In fact, we are collectively the people that know the most how technology is moving, how fast it's moving. And to keep up with figuring out what we can do, how to use the technologies, also what those technologies can do, the affordances, is a great deal to think about. And now, so let me go into a little bit more about the problem. So what's caused the problems in schools is there's people trying to do the right thing. We've got school leaders that are saying, you know what we need to do? We need to use mobile technologies. I will buy you all a set of technologies and mobile technologies, and you can use them with students. So they go out and spend a lot of money, a great deal of money, and they hand it over to the teachers. And to me, that's just like saying to a teacher, I've bought a really expensive violin for you. So now I've purchased this and given it to you, you'll know what to do with it. And you'll be able to not only use it yourself, but you'll be able to have your students using it to learn. It doesn't quite work that way. And also, and I'm glad to see people agreeing with me in the audience, you've seen this happen, that they've invested this money, handed it over, and it's kind of, why is it not working? So the other problem is, we do have teachers that are really on board and they're saying, okay, what can we do? They think, okay, what have I done before and what can I use mobile for? And worksheets. I hate worksheets, I have to admit. Worksheets in education are one of the lowest end things you can do. They're just basically getting students to repeat information, getting them to fill in the blanks. In education in the UK and Australia especially, and the US, worksheets were often used. In fact, who remembers using worksheets in school? Put your hand up if you had worksheets as a student. Okay, everybody else? Wow, you're very lucky. I'd like to find out what countries are you from. But these worksheets these teachers are thinking, okay, we've got these great websites here, how to use worksheets on an iPad? No. If we were using worksheets, and I saw various ages of people putting their hand up, if we were doing that ages ago, why on earth are we doing that today? Technology now, there's so many affordances that we can do so much more. Why are we replicating what people have done before? And even some have got these great names. It's not worksheets anymore, it's digital worksheets. They're still the same thing. We need to be moving away from these things and looking at other ways of learning to really effectively reach the learner and have them understand what those concepts are that we're teaching them. And the way I always describe this is we're basically using 21st century technologies with 20th century teaching. So we need to go beyond. Now, I've been fortunate enough, you heard me mention a few countries before, you probably gathered by now that I'm a professor in the US, but I don't have a US accent. I'm actually from the north of England, around the Manchester area, but I've been fortunate to be able to do research in very different places, and I've been fortunate as well to work with the United Nations, UNESCO, and ITU to be able to see what mobile learning looks like in various countries across the world, and how mobile affordances, again, beyond other tethered technologies, are bringing learning to people that could never experience and have those resources before, that they can see on devices, pictures of animals that they've never met before in their lives, and having new experiences. But the problem is we've got then teachers that are trying to figure out how on earth to do this. What do we do with these violins that have come in, these weird, strange devices? We might use them at home, go on Facebook or wherever else, but that doesn't mean we know what to do with them when it comes to learning. They need basically a roadmap. Now, roadmaps can come in the form of frameworks, guidance for how to do things. Now, what I did as part of my research is I looked at all the different frameworks of how to integrate technology effectively into education. And this included everything from mobile technologies, but just to all general technologies, digital technologies. So I found two frameworks that were very useful for teachers. They are the TPAC and the SAMA frameworks. And again, keep invested. So if you're thinking about educators that work with your children, your nieces, your nephews, think about things like this, because this is great to be able to help them meet the needs of your children, your nieces, nephews. So the first framework I want to tell you about, TPAC, it actually was derived from what Schulman created. And it's basically saying, okay, as teachers, they need to have knowledge of the subject area, the content knowledge. So if I'm a mathematics teacher, I need to know about mathematics. But then over here, we have pedagogical knowledge. Pedagogical is actually a Greek word for lead the child, which means basically how you get that message across. Now, you might have met it, and I'm guessing all of you have been to university. You get these great educators that really know the stuff. They know the content. But actually getting it across to you, they're not as good at it. That's very important. My husband's great at things like driving and all sorts of things, and I remember years ago when he was trying to teach me, he wasn't very good. There's no point having that knowledge and trying to get it across to someone unless you have these skills. That's why educators go to college and are taught those skills in pedagogy. So now TPAC went a little bit further. So the Venn diagram now bringing in technology. Now this is focused on the three things. So I'd like to think of the kind of analogy here of juggling. So the teacher, first of all, has the content knowledge. There's the one ball. Then they have the pedagogical knowledge. And they've got to juggle these two together. Who can juggle two balls? Oh, me and three others? Any more? Great. Okay, so you're good with 2. Okay, so you've got to kind of synchronize these 2 balls in the air to make sure they're working effectively. Otherwise, juggling doesn't happen. So you're doing those 2 things, but then teachers have to focus on technological knowledge. That's 3 balls. Anyone juggle with 3 balls? Oh, straight, confident one over there. If you ever need to know how to do it, he knows how. 2 people in the audience can juggle with 3 balls. Yeah, that's kind of scary, isn't it? That is a real trick to be able to do that. Teachers have to do that every day. They have to know about the content knowledge. They have to know how to get it across to the students. Now let me give you a bit more description on that. It's things like, do we do paired work? Do they work on their own? Do they work in teams, collaboratively? Do we get them using worksheets? Hopefully not. Or do we get them using other activities where we use critical thinking skills? You know, how are we going to do it? Do we need little manipulatives? If they're doing mathematics and they're very young, do they need blocks to be able to work this out? Now, the technological knowledge comes in with teachers knowing what technologies are out there, what they can use, what's available to them, what's free, what the school have purchased, and how to use all these effectively. And the 3-ball juggling comes in that it's all got to come together effectively. You can't just choose any content to go with any pedagogy, to go with any technology. It doesn't work that way. For example, okay, I'm going to think about addition, very young children. So I want them to understand addition. The way I'm going to do that, remember this is a non-example, this is something that doesn't work. So very young children learning how to add basic small numbers. Pedagogy, I'm going to have them presenting in front of the class. It's not right, is it? That's not going to be a good way to do it. And I'm going to get them using spreadsheets. It's not going to work. But let me give you another example, something that does work. I've got older students in high school studying biology. They have to figure out pond life. They have to look at what's there and what those lives are there, animals, and plants. Pedagogy, I'm going to have them working in partners. I'm going to have them on a field trip out, looking at an actual pond, figuring out what's there. The technology I'm going to use a program on the internet, something like iSpot, that has the students, when they find something, a creature that they don't recognize, they can take a photograph of that creature with their mobile devices, and they can upload it to the web on this program called iSpot, and there's various ones like it, where experts will find out what that creature is and directly answer them. So they've got other instructors there as well as the teacher. You're probably thinking, well, why can't the teacher do that? Teacher's one person. You've got multiple, about 30 children in the class, and that's a lot of children to be able to meet their needs every second. The internet has got a whole host of information there for them to have. So why shouldn't they have it? So there's our juggling act. Right, shift slightly now. So TPAC was great for understanding how we get technology effectively integrated. But now thinking about the technology, we could have used, again, those digital worksheets on an iPad. So that I could be using technology, but there was no point using technology if you're going to have worksheets on an iPad. You might as well give the students pieces of paper. There's no difference. This framework here, it only came out in 2013, so it's fairly recent. This one has teachers thinking about what type of technology they are using. So substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition. The bottom two there are just enhancement. So the first one is substitution. Technology acts as a substitute, no functional change. That's your basic worksheet. Then augmentation. Technology acts as a direct tool substitute with functional improvement, so there is a little bit of improvement there. This is where we want teachers to be focused on, trying to get above here to modification and redefinition. Modification, focus on technology allowing for significant task redesign. Now, redefinition is tough for teachers to always meet. This is extremely hard for them to have to rethink everything they've experienced in school themselves, everything they've learned, to think, okay, how do children learn and how can I use technology to do something that will really meet their needs? And that's redefinition at the top. A complete redesign for tasks that couldn't be preconceived. Just to give you a little bit more of a clearer understanding of those, I'm going to go through quickly. Substitution. You could use Google Earth instead of a map. If you're just looking for a place, you could use a paper map, just the same. Augmentation. Using Google Earth rulers to measure the distance between the two places. So that's got some improvement. Or for modification, use Google Earth layers such as Panorama and 360 cities to research locations. So that's doing things that you couldn't do with a paper map. That's going way beyond. Or even further, to redefinition, create a narrated Google Earth guided tour and share this online. So hopefully I've got you understanding there that technology is very important to incorporate into learning. But we also have to think about how we're using that technology to have students understand in a much better way than we had them understanding before. Now, with my research that I did, I looked at all the different frameworks and I tried to develop one for mobile learning. So I brought together everything we had. I focused on the TPAC framework, the SAMA, and the various mobile frameworks were available. And I found that the mobile frameworks, and rightly so, were very focused. It was something like, what app works best in this virtual learning environment, or learning management system, whichever way you want to call it. They were very, very focused on a small area. I need something a little bit bigger. But I brought together everything they had to develop this framework. And there's 4 significant areas here. There's beliefs, resources, methods, and purpose. So the first one is beliefs. And that's, to me, and only through doing this did I actually realize, the educator's beliefs, that's the thing that has to be positive towards technology and has to be changed to be positive towards technology. Otherwise, they won't be using it effectively. And then when I'm saying beliefs there, it could be the role of the teacher. If they believe the teacher is, I will tell you what everything is. You don't need to do anything. I will tell you, and you're like vessels to be filled. I will give you the information. If you like that, you're not going to want the student pulling out a device in the middle of class and searching for things themselves. That will go against what your ideas are. It's kind of, no, put that device away, I will tell you. But if you're a teacher that has the students wanting to understand themselves, and that is the best way students learn, so again, thinking about your own children, if you want them to really understand, you'll have to get them invested in that. You'll have to get them thinking, okay, how does that work? What do you think? How does that connect with what you've been thinking before and what you know? Why don't you perhaps take your device out and have a look? Ask someone somewhere their opinion as well, because we've got to learn from technology that we don't have to know the answer for everything. We just have to know where to look for it. And technology is a great way of doing that. I described before about the time we're in at the moment, that it's a very kind of unsettled time for the fact that technology is moving on so quickly. I'm sure you're probably all aware, but for education terms, the Gutenberg printing press was a huge era that came, a creation that created a huge era in that people didn't have knowledge, and if they wanted books, they didn't have access to books. But then the printing press came along and printed books for people to read. You didn't have to be in the church or anyone important. You can actually get a book yourself and learn. That was, in education times, that was a huge period of time where people were learning so much more than they could do before. And hopefully you're making the connection now to the internet. The internet, the digital age, again, is so different. If you think about when you were younger, where did you go for information? Did you go to your teacher? Did you go to the library? Did you ask your parents? Where do you think they go now? Yes, I've got even people showing me movements. Yes, exactly. They'll go to those people, but they'll also go to the internet. They'll go on the computers, they'll go to devices and ask these questions. So we're in a whole new era here. That's why it's moving along so quickly and why it's so important for education. So beliefs, keep focused on that. Resources is the second one. Obviously, they do need these items. They do need a person there to be able to help them. They do need training in understanding how to use it. Methods. They have to think about the methods, the teaching that matches the technology. What you use technology in a face-to-face class, it'll be different than online. So that's, again, will affect the way that the teacher thinks about using technology. The last one is the purpose. And this probably hit home to many of you as I described this. How are those devices being used? Are they used as time fillers? Oh, I'm a bit busy at the moment. You just go on your iPad. You just go and use the technology and just have a play around for a bit. If it's used as a time filler, that's not effective use of the device. It can work sometimes, as we all know, but that's not effective use in the teaching. So that's a framework, an overall framework. Now, I did say, okay, mobile technologies can do things we've never done before. So the question is, what can it help us do that we could never do before? There are 5 main points. So be thinking about what you know about technology and tethered technology. There's 5 points here: the contingent, situated, authentic, personalized, and context-aware. So the first one, contingent learning. There's a student walking down the street and he sees a billboard. And there's a word there he doesn't understand, but he wants to know what that word is because it looks funny. He can get on his device and he can check what that word is. You can't do that with a tethered technology unless you kind of walk around with a big computer and kind of plug it in somewhere. So for contingent learning, serendipitous learning, mobile technologies are great. Situated learning. So again, imagine this for teachers. Teachers can be talking about ponds. They can be there at a pond with the technologies to help them. They can be learning about churches. They could be in a church. About castles, they could be at a castle, and so on, whatever's in the location. So there's situated learning. And if you understand about your own learning, you're probably thinking, yes, well, if I want to learn about one of those things, I'm better in the environment that it happens in. Authentic learning. Authentic learning is when students are doing jobs that an adult would do. For example, an architect. Mobile learning greatly helps with this, again, because you can be anywhere, and you can actually be doing something that, an authentic activity, something that an adult would do. Personalized. Personalized learning does come greatly, and this connects with many of you. I've seen some of the posters this morning. That personalization is a big part of what you do. But think about how mobile devices can add even more personalization. Students can even, I had this discussion this morning, students can be in different locations, maybe in a darker area of the classroom, maybe sitting on the floor or instead of sitting on the desk. There are different locations they could be using. They could also have the headphones on and the sound louder for the video if they have hearing issues. So that's where personalization can be more than it would be with tethered technologies. Right, the final one here, context-aware, is what I focus on a lot. Context-aware ubiquitous learning. And this is basically that you are learning about the content while interacting with real-life phenomenon of that content. So for example, this student here is learning about angles. Instead of having a textbook and opening a book on angles, they are actually in the real world that they know, looking at the angles that they have in that environment. This student here chose the playground, and she was looking at the bars here on the ladder, looking at the different angles there. And you might think, well, what's the difference in learning from a textbook? There is a great deal of difference. And to help you recognize this, who has ever, when they were younger, been sat in a mathematics class thinking, when will I ever need this when I get older? I saw various people kind of going, yes. Mathematics, and I have to say I've got a PhD in mathematics, so I focus a lot on that way. Mathematics is so irrelevant, students think. They think, what's the point? Why are you telling me this? I'll do it because I have to do it, but once I've finished in school, I'll never need it again. They're not connecting because we've not connected it to the real world that they live in. So that is really important, that we need to let them see there's mathematics all around them, and they need to be able to connect to that. I'm going to just go to one last slide. That was kind of my cue. One last slide. Perfect? Yes. Okay, so this last one. Again, I designed this on what was called Bronfenbrenner's ecological framework. And at the very center, it used to have the child growing up. And it looked at all the influences. So all those 4 parts I talked to you about, beliefs, resources, and so on, they're in here. And this has the teacher in the middle instead. So thinking about the educator there, they have their own beliefs, which, as I described, makes a big difference. But then going out, that's kind of the individual themselves. Then going outwards, the microsystem will be the school. So that the school are working, do they have the training there? Do they have the technological support? Do they have access to technology tools? And is it face-to-face or online? You know, all these aspects. Then the mesosystem, you'll notice a lot of arrows. And this is basically saying they're influenced by the smaller systems as well as the larger, and they kind of connect across. For example, the exosystem, policies. But they also could have policies at the microsystem in the schools. So again, thinking about how are they all interconnected. So the exosystem, funding for tech support, textbook or course adoption that they have, these all make a big influence on how they're going to adopt those mobile technologies. Funding for tech, and the very macro system, the very larger system, that's the national. So in other words, thinking about the country that they're living in. So technology, cultural norms, is technology ubiquitous? Or is it a country that is not as ubiquitous? These are going to make big differences. What are the standards of the country? What's the content that they have to learn? The internet connectivity. We could say, yes, they should all use mobile devices. If we don't have internet connectivity, that's going to make a big difference, which will filter all the way back to how that educator incorporates technology. So that's kind of a large thing to leave you on. But I saw lots of people take pictures, and this is also going to be included in my slides, so you have access to that. But thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Helen Crompton.